Something strange happened during day 2 of testing in Barcelona, and nobody's talking about it. While the headlines were dominated by Ayumu Hajar's crash in the Red Bull and Max Verstappen's criticism of the new 2026 rules, Ferrari was doing something else entirely. Quiet, methodical, almost invisible. They weren't chasing headlines, but they were on track, lap after lap. While others waited out the drizzle or struggled with battery calibration, Ferrari just kept running. And now, leaked data from trackside observers and GPS overlays suggests that Ferrari's real performance might be far more competitive than what the official timing screens showed. Because here's the thing, the timesheets don't tell the full story. They never do in testing. But the distance covered, the consistency, the energy deployment patterns, that's where the truth hides. And if what we've seen is accurate, then Ferrari didn't just have a good day in Barcelona. They might have just taken the first real step toward a title fight. One Formula One wasn't ready to admit is already underway. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary day. Wet conditions, a few red flags, limited running from several teams. But if you paid attention to what was happening, not on the screens, but behind them, one team was doing something very different. Ferrari showed up to Barcelona with one goal, to accumulate data, no matter the conditions. While other teams held back, concerned about weather or battery mapping, Ferrari didn't hesitate. They put in the laps, and they kept going rain, wind, or dry patches in between. Leclerc was the first out. He completed over 60 laps in the morning alone, including multiple medium and high fuel stints. Not once did the SF-26 look unstable. Not once did the team signal any reliability concerns over the radio. And even more importantly, he didn't lock up. That sounds small, but in wet conditions on a brand new car, it's a sign of confidence. Then came Hamilton. The fact that he even drove that afternoon is a statement in itself. This isn't about marketing. It's about trust. You don't put a 7-time world champion in a new car mid-test unless the team knows exactly what they're doing. And Hamilton, he didn't waste the opportunity. He pushed through multiple stints with pace that, on paper, looked average. But what Ferrari was watching wasn't the stopwatch. It was the behavior. Battery deployment under low-grip exits. Cooling temperatures through Sector 3. Even how the rear axle responded to multiple lap stints on inconsistent surfaces. Everything Ferrari logged on day 2, they logged with purpose. And that's what separates this test from the noise. Because while the rest of the grid struggled to manage limited dry laps, Ferrari left the circuit with more answers than questions. And that's never just a coincidence. So let's talk about the numbers. Because buried underneath the official lap counts and sector times is a set of telemetry data that was never meant to reach the media. It came from a third-party GPS overlay, one used by rival teams and select partners to monitor car behavior in real time, not just lap times, but deployment curves, braking zones, throttle maps. And in this data, Ferrari's real pace starts to show in a way that never appeared on screen. What the overlays reveal is this: Leclerc's best lap wasn't a push lap. In fact, none of his dry lap stints were driven at full throttle. Ferrari was lifting 70 to 120 meters earlier than expected on most laps, especially down the main straight and into turn 1. That's not defensive driving, that's deliberate concealment. Even more curious is the battery deployment. Both Leclerc and Hamilton ran in a low ERS mode, lower than what most teams use for even their mid-fuel simulations. Yet their sector splits, especially in the middle sector, remained within half a second of Red Bull's reference time. No flashy purple sectors, no chart-topping laps, just clean, repeatable speed hiding in plain sight. One insider, speaking off the record, said the consistency was too perfect. The suggestion being that Ferrari knew exactly where the limit was, but chose not to show it, because the moment they do, every other team starts planning for it. And this is where things get uncomfortable. Because if Ferrari's testing pace was masked and the FIA's public data stream didn't reflect deployment or lifting zones, what else are we not seeing? And how many teams already know the answer, but aren't saying a word? At first glance, Ferrari did everything by the book. They ran within permitted power limits. They rotated drivers within their allocated session times. And they followed FIA protocols on tire usage, energy deployment, and wet/dry run configurations. But that's not the full story. Because in Formula One, legality is rarely about what's written. It's about how far you're willing to stretch what isn't. The 2026 regulations, especially around hybrid deployment, leave massive room for interpretation. Unlike previous seasons, teams now have more control over how and when energy is harvested, stored, and released. And here's the critical detail. There's no standard map the FIA enforces during testing, which means what Ferrari ran could be a map so conservative it hides their real pace, or so aggressive in energy management it pushes right to the edge of compliance. This is where things get uncomfortable, because when rival teams start noticing exactly where the SF-26 is lifting, and how consistently it regenerates without losing speed in key zones, they start to ask questions, not to the media, but to the FIA. Is Ferrari using a dual deployment trick? Is there a calibration mode that repositions the battery release curve without triggering flagging on telemetry? No one's accusing, but they are watching. It's not the first time this has happened. In 2019, Ferrari was involved in a similar ambiguity, where fuel flow manipulation wasn't illegal until it suddenly was. That saga ended in private settlements and unanswered questions. And what we're seeing now is starting to feel eerily familiar. And this is where the real tension lives. Because if Ferrari has found a clever way to manipulate the test data, not to cheat, but to conceal, then they might already be one step ahead of the FIA's control loop. And that's where the gray turns to shadow. Here's the truth. The FIA isn't panicking because Ferrari was fast. They're worried because Ferrari was fast without showing it. And in testing, that kind of restraint is almost always intentional. See, the concern isn't top speed. It's repeatability. Ferrari didn't just run quick laps, they ran them over and over again in low power modes, under varying track conditions. No major drop-off, no instability, and no official explanation from the team about the underlying performance. To the FIA, this raises a deeper issue. How much are they actually seeing? Because unlike race weekends, pre-season testing gives teams complete freedom over energy settings, ride height configurations, and aero maps. And when a team starts combining those tools to control what others see, not just what the sensors read, that becomes a political problem. The real fear? That Ferrari has already begun treating testing not as preparation, but as camouflage. And if one team is doing it, others will follow if they haven't already. This leads to a dangerous precedent, because if teams are no longer testing performance but disguising it, the FIA loses visibility, not just over lap times, but over compliance. It becomes impossible to measure who's pushing and who's hiding. And by the time they realize it, the season's already begun. Worse still, this isn't just about Ferrari. Several insiders have hinted that Mercedes is also experimenting with alternate energy harvesting. Red Bull, despite Hadjar's crash, may already be 2 development cycles ahead on deployment efficiency. And Alpine? They haven't even shown their full spec yet. The FIA is now facing a reality where every team could be hiding something. And if they can't verify what's real and what's masked, how do they enforce fairness? Because the real threat here isn't one team being clever. It's that no one is showing the truth anymore, and the rules were never written to handle that kind of silence. If Ferrari's approach to testing was as calculated as it appears, then we're looking at something much bigger than a fast lap or a strong debut. We're looking at a strategic shift, a team preparing for the long game, not just the first race. And that creates shockwaves. For Mercedes, this could trigger a full-scale reassessment. They've already lost ground over the last 2 seasons. If Ferrari is now operating in stealth mode, gathering data, refining systems, and hiding their true power, Mercedes can't afford to play it safe. They might be forced to reveal their hand earlier than planned or risk entering the season blind. Red Bull, meanwhile, isn't in the clear. Yes, they had the fastest time. Yes, they dominated 2023 and 2024. But Verstappen's recent comments hint at growing discomfort with the new regulations, especially around how the power units feel on track. If Ferrari has found a way to stabilize the deployment curve under these rules, Red Bull might suddenly find themselves chasing stability rather than performance. This puts the FIA in an impossible position. Do they clamp down now, before the season starts, and demand full telemetry transparency from all teams? Or do they wait, knowing that by round 1, the gaps could be locked in? And what about the midfield? Teams like Aston Martin and McLaren, who were quietly optimistic after 2025, may now realize they're even further behind than expected. Because if Ferrari is already hiding pace, and Red Bull hasn't shown their final spec, the true hierarchy may not be visible until the first qualifying session in Bahrain. By then, it could be too late to react. And here's where the danger multiplies. Because when teams start making assumptions based on incomplete data, development paths diverge. The wrong upgrade, deployed too early, could destroy an entire season. And in a cost cap era, there's no room for second chances. So this isn't just about Ferrari being fast. It's about Ferrari potentially triggering a chain reaction, forcing rivals to change plans, burn through budgets, and take risks they otherwise wouldn't. And if that happens, the 2026 season won't be remembered for the new cars. It'll be remembered as the year the entire field was baited into playing Ferrari's game. What happened in Barcelona over these 2 days was never about lap times. It wasn't about rain delays or rookie mistakes or even top speeds. It was about control. Control of information. Control of perception. Control of how much truth gets out and how much stays locked inside encrypted telemetry files, far from public view. And that control is slipping. Because if Ferrari really did run a mass program, and the GPS leak is even half accurate, then there are already voices inside the paddock calling for more oversight. Private meetings between team principals and FI liaisons have already started. Nothing public yet, but the tone has shifted. And here's the part no one is saying out loud. This might not even be the final version of the SF-26. Multiple sources have hinted at a second-phase power unit, set to be tested behind closed doors in Fiorano within weeks. A configuration optimized for high thermal loads under the 2026 battery cycle, which, if accurate, would mean the car we saw in Barcelona wasn't even the real weapon. So now, rival teams are left guessing. They've seen a version of Ferrari's hand, just enough to feel uneasy, but not enough to act decisively. And every day they hesitate, the advantage grows. The FIA faces a silent countdown. If they intervene too soon, they risk undermining a team that might be playing fair. But if they wait too long, they'll have lost the chance to keep 2026 competitive before it ever began. And here's the final twist. There's already talk, quiet off the record, that this style of mask testing won't stop here. That what Ferrari has done could become the new template. And once that starts, no one's showing anything anymore. So remember, Barcelona was just the first test. The real championship hasn't even started. But the psychological war? That's already underway. And this may only be the first chapter of a much bigger disruption, one formula one still isn't ready to face.